Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandy Martin. I am the Economic Development Manager with Duke Energy for this corridor, and also this year's chair of the South Carolina I-77 Alliance. And I'd like to welcome you to our 11th annual Alliance Economic Development Summit. We're delighted to have you all here today as we reflect on another year of significant growth and regional prosperity. Looking back over the past year, it's clear that the I-77 corridor continues to be a hot spot for economic activity, as we have seen a surge in new businesses and expansions, creating more opportunities and strengthening our communities. This success is a direct result of the partnerships in this room, and we thank you for those. Your ongoing commitment and investments are the driving force behind our achievements. We'd like also to welcome our new investors who have joined us this year. Your interest and trust speak volumes about the potential of this region, so thank you. We have an interesting program lined up today to explore what's next for our region and how we can continue this momentum together. But first, we have a very special guest here today that I'd like to introduce. He actually needs no introduction to all the South Carolinians and anybody in this room, but I'll offer a short one anyway. Lindsey Graham, a U.S. Senator from South Carolina, is known for his work on national defense and fiscal issues. He was elected to the Senate in 2002 after previously serving in the U.S. House of Representatives. A retired colonel, Senator Graham served for 33 years in the U.S. Air Force, including active duty and reserves. He currently serves on the Senate committees on Appropriations, Judiciary, and Budget. Please welcome our United States Senator, Lindsey Graham. Thank you so much for being here.
And that's well done. You read it like we wrote it. Thank you very much. Well, that's the tall version. Now you're going to get the short version of me. So I'm glad to be here. I'm not going to, overly talk here because I know you got a guest speaker, and I'm very interested in what she has to say about the labor market. If you don't have good, reliable workers, then it's pretty hard to be successful, right? To our tech colleges here, you're a godsend to the state. We're able to attract industry by hooking up with y'all guys. You can train anybody to do about anything we want. And people come to South Carolina because it's a good place to live, right? We want to keep it that way. A safe place, a great place to have do business because it's a good workforce. We got good infrastructure politically. We got low taxes and business-friendly government just about everywhere in South Carolina. So this alliance, I want to just tell you, is a big deal to me. There are 46 counties, right, with 159 needs. So when you get 5 counties working together, it helps me help you. There's only so much money to go around. I'm an earmarker. I direct money from Washington back home. I think I'm the only one that does it on our side. And the reason I do it is I think I'll have a better idea of what you need than somebody you've never met. And we got some police cars today for Lancaster, and now I got to get police cars for everybody because you can't just get one police car. So just be patient, Chester and everybody else. We're going to try. So I met 2 sheriffs today that got along well. This Zelensky and Putin. If they could do like these 2 guys from Chester and Lancaster, we'd be in a good shape. Nobody got shot. Everything was good. I want to create sort of a law enforcement component to the Business Alliance. Now, the Business Alliance makes sure this is a great place to do business. You work on your infrastructure needs, road, water, sewer. Exits matter. You want to make sure the exits are good, not just for a gas station, but for big business if they want to come here. So on the safety side, I want this corridor to be one of the safest places you could live in South Carolina. So we're going to get all 5 counties talking together. What do they need? How can they better cooperate? How can they better share information to make all of us safer? So wherever I have an alliance, I want to have a law enforcement component to it. And a little bit about our law enforcement. Our state law enforcement retirement system is underfunded. Some people say up to $88 million. I'm not really sure, but it doesn't have enough money. So younger law enforcement officers have to serve to 28 versus 25. And because of a shortfall in the fund, if you retire, to get your retirement, you have to sit out a year before you can come back. And a lot of people never come back. So I want to have a retire and retain program. It's hard right now to find qualified people to be law enforcement officers. I hear it from every sheriff. So what I want to do is try to find a way to help this situation. The 287G program is a partnership between ICE and local law enforcement. Local law enforcement's not rounding up people because of immigration violations, but when they arrest somebody in the normal course of business and we find out they're here illegally, there's a program to work with ICE to hold them and turn them over for processing by ICE. These counties, I think all of them participate. I'll make sure that's right, but I want to have a good partnership with ICE because I want drug dealers and human traffickers to keep going down 95 and all these other roads saying South Carolina is the worst place to do business if you're in the drug trafficking business. So the more we can make the cartels think that South Carolina is not a good place to do business, the safer we are. I've tried my best to meet your needs. Every county tells me what they need. I try to do my best to get the money back home. We got a debt problem up there, but we're going to spend some of this money somewhere, and I'd rather spend it here than someplace I don't know. One last thing. Sandy, you're in the power business. The biggest challenge I think our nation has, other than a qualified workforce, finding good workers, is power. If the AI hits the way we think it's going to hit, every AI data center has a tremendous power need. They're talking about AI alone almost doubling the power need, at least by 50%. If you can electrify vehicles, which we will to some extent, every car that's electrified has to be plugged into something. So where does this power come from? I think it's a big challenge. If we want to be successful in the AI space and compete against China, we got to have an abundant, affordable power supply. And that, to me, is one of the greatest challenges of our time. These 2 nuclear power plants that failed, we need to get them up and running. They're going to be rebid. In the tax bill, their production tax credits for nuclear survived. So I want to find new buyers for these plants and get them built because nuclear power is reliable, affordable, and it's non-emitting. It's good for the environment. So from my point of view, we're going to have to really up our game in the power space. We just passed the One Big Beautiful Bill. I think it's good. It gives you certainty in your tax structure. If you're looking to invest, you can accelerate the depreciation for your investment. For a family of 4, it's $2,800 in your pocket that would have been lost in December. So I think it's going to have a big benefit. The border being secure helps us all, and our military got some money too. But just one last thing about the highway. It changed everything. Do you agree? This road out here changed everything. I was at the port a couple of days ago. It's the crown jewel of the state economically. About $80 billion of business is related to that port. The cars made in Greer by BMW, over half are sold throughout the world, and they go through the Port of Charleston. Every big and small business in this state in some way benefits from the Port of Charleston. We went from 46 feet in depth to 52. Now, why was that important? It took us longer to do that than to build the Panama Canal. It's not easy to do things in America, but we finally got it done. 52 feet allows these large Panamax ships to come to Charleston 24/7 regardless of the tide. We're the deepest port on the East Coast. That will help you. Why? Because the more ships that come to Charleston, the more product to be delivered through South Carolina coming up this highway. And if you're looking at a place to do business and you want access to world markets, South Carolina gives you a real good footprint. So when you break up that large cargo ship, some of it will go by rail, some of it will go by truck, some of it will go by inland water. And I want South Carolina to have the best connection to the Southeast and America's distribution economy of any place on the East Coast. The more those ships come into Charleston, the more I-77 benefits. Does that make sense? So what I want to do is make sure you have the roads, the water, and the sewer to maximize the benefit of this highway to these 5 counties. You got 2 very large counties, and you got 3 very rural counties that can get in a room without a big fight. That's a good thing. To the business members of this alliance, I appreciate you working together. Many of you compete in the same space, but when you come together to build up the region, you're actually building up your own business, I think. So competitors working together is what Chambers do, and it's what I-77 does. Wouldn't it be nice if Washington could follow your lead? Competitors working together. So I've got 85 co-sponsors for a bill that will allow President Trump to put tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil and gas to prop up Putin's war machine. It's an example of how we can come together for the common good. No matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, this war in Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, needs to end before it gets NATO involved with Russia. And China's watching everything we do in Ukraine. The world is connected. One day I'm in Aner, and the next day I'm in Amsterdam. And I like my job. I like working, and Aner's a much nicer place, by the way. I like my job because it gives me a chance to be partners with people in my state that have a common vision. And where I find that common vision, you'll have an investor in me. Where I find fussing, fighting, I'm gonna let you fuss and fight. But where people come together, my office is ready to help you. I'm looking for collaboration at home, in Washington, and abroad. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Senator Graham. In addition to the senator, I want to recognize quickly some of our other federal and state and local officials who are here. From the South Carolina Senate, we have Senator Everett Stubbs. From the South Carolina House of Representatives, we have Representative John King, Representative Randy Ligon, and Representative Annie McDaniel. And then on the local level, we're graced with the presence of John Black from the Rock Hill City Council, Brian Carnes from the Lancaster County Council, John Geddes, Mayor of Rock Hill, Paul Livingston, Richland County Council, Charlene McGriff, Lancaster County Council, and Charlene is the former chair of this organization, and Pete Wilson from the Chester County Council. So let's all give them a round of applause. Now, before we enjoy our meal, I'd like to offer a blessing. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we're grateful for this opportunity to come together today to celebrate our achievements and enjoy each other's company. Thank you for blessing this country, this state, and this region so bountifully. Help us never to take for granted our hard-fought freedom, the jobs that put food on our tables, or the diverse workforce, our friends and neighbors who guarantee those jobs get done. Bless this food now as it nourishes and strengthens us for every task. May each one, large or small, bring you glory. In your Son's merciful, hopeful, and holy name we pray. Amen. Enjoy your meal.
So I just wanted to kind of go ahead and jump into this and kind of make sure that if there are maybe some questions for Dr. Ulrich at the end, that that's going to be made available to her. But welcome, everyone. My name is Christopher Finn. I'm the interim president and CEO here at the I-77 Alliance. I want to welcome everyone for coming here today. I know that we're all here because we're all trying to build our communities, trying to improve the growth of the regional economy, and we all have a vested interest in the growth of that. And us working together is the Alliance. The Alliance really is a collection of everybody that's in this room and the partnerships that have been made because of the organization. But really, we're not the ones that are kind of pushing everything to the forefront. We're more just being as responsive to everyone that we can be. So I'm just going to go through a few slides today. I want to give a little bit of background about the Alliance for those that aren't really too familiar with us, and then get into a little bit of detail before we pass it off for the keynote speaker. So kind of just to give a quick outline up front, who are we? What are some of the basics about the Alliance? We're a 5-county economic development organization. There's 8 of them in the state. And for a little while, this region wasn't represented at all due to the Charlotte Regional Business Alliance's extent into South Carolina. York County Council actually was the one that kind of spearheaded the decision to move forward with putting together this group. And now we've grown to the 5-county region that we are today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our public and private board. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, so for anyone that's investing in us, there's the advantages there for the tax benefits. And then really, what are we doing? We're a little more unique than the other regional alliances in that we don't do project management. So our focus is on marketing, value-added support services back to the counties, and then lead generation. And those are the things that we're going to be focusing on today. Really quick, though, I wanted people to have an understanding of what our governance looked like. This type of structure, where we are a public-private entity, it allows us to really be strategic and responsive both to the communities through government as well as through our private sector partners. And the way that our board was set up is that every county is on our board. The county economic development director is on our board by default, either the highest county council member or admin, county executive. And then we have 3 private sector seats. So for each of our 5 counties, they have those 5 seats. We also have a seat for the 2 technical colleges of York Tech and Midlands Tech. And this, again, with our terms and with the fundraising and with the pursuits that we've been trying to secure with our board, it really allows us to be, as I said, as responsive as possible. And another thing to note, we do rotate our board chair. Right now, as we know, Sandy Martin is our current board chair, but we do public-private, and we flip them back and forth each year. So next year, Councilman Pugh will be our chairman, and then we'll have another private sector vice chair, and then it'll rotate out from there. But again, these are the people in the room. I just want to thank everyone that is on this list. If you're here, I'm not going to ask you to stand, but again, if you know people on here, if you recognize some names, these are the ones that are really kind of keep you tapped into what we're doing. So what is the foundation of the Alliance? Really what we tried to position ourselves as is being a partner. We wanted to be responsive and supportive to these 5 counties. We wanted to make sure that we're reliable and dependable. And what we manage is marketing, research, outreach. What we have on the slide here is just a sample of some of the data platforms that we secure on behalf of the counties. What this does is free up the budgets for those counties to not have to invest in this type of work and just allow us to support them on their efforts. But the bigger side of what we do is the economic development and the lead generation efforts. So for our 2024-2025 marketing calendar, in total, I'll say that we, at the beginning of the year, when we sit down with all of our economic development directors, we had a calendar of about 70 events. And I'll note that those 70 events, that's not the Alliance's responsibility. What we do is, because we have those county economic development directors on our board, they are sent out on behalf of, as representatives of the Regional Alliance, and we send these county economic development directors to those 70 trade shows, missions, events that we coordinate with our partners. And what this does is, again, it allows the county economic development directors to get in front of prospects directly. It allows them to be more strategic with the South Carolina Department of Commerce and their efforts. And then it also allows them to coordinate their own messaging, when they're on the road with their community partners. We did attend 25 site selection and economic development events over the year, which is 10 more than usual. We definitely had a focus on targeting site selectors this year with our messaging. Domestic and international trade shows, we did almost 20 of them. We're down a few of them, but that was more just a scheduling calendar conflicts than anything. 20 trade missions is a very impressive roster for economic development for a calendar year. And it's really, again, because of the partnership that we're able to get in front of this many leads and prospects. At the bottom here, we just highlight some of the shows that we've been at. We go around the world, or we send our partners around the world. We say that there's really no cost to the county, and we really want to stress that, if someone is attending these events on our behalf, every dollar is reimbursed. So travel, transportation, accommodations, there's no expense that falls back to the county. But it's easier for us to do that than if there's a trip to Korea or Europe, it's a little easier for us to fund that than to ask, the counties to take that into their budgets. This slide, I really just wanted to kind of talk about the return on the investment, because that's really how I feel one of our best measures of our productivity. Over there on the left-hand side, what you see is that is our 2024-25 expenses. And another way to think about those expenses is these are the services, this is the value that our counties are receiving. And if you take into account that each of the counties pay a prorated membership fee as a part of the alliance, what that does is that allows all of them to receive the same return on investment. And what we did was we calculated those expenses, those services added, and we calculated what they were contributing into the alliance. And it works out that every county is receiving a 5x return, about 488% return on every dollar that's invested. And we feel that that's something that's more significant than these counties trying to cobble this together themselves and trying to have individual initiatives. So again, the counties receive $4.88 in economic development services for every dollar invested in the alliance. And we really stress that when we're out there, when we're talking with companies, when we're talking with county councils, the fact that we're as efficient as we are, not having that project management, there's no duplication of services with other regional alliances. And what we do is we're allowed to just stay focused on our mission and allow our counties to be as successful as they can. We did just wrap up a capital campaign. As many of you in the room might know, you might have met with myself and Aaron Bemis over the past year. We had probably about 70 meetings, which was great. And what we were able to do was secure the operational funds component of our budget for 5 years. We were looking for 5-year commitments from some of our partners, understanding that we're going to be, again, showing the value that we're going to be returning for that investment. We set a goal of $1 million over that 5-year period. We met with about 70 companies. We were able to get committed about 86% of that total. But what we still have open is $700,000. And those are people that we've met with that just haven't said yes or no either way. So we're still confident that we're going to be able to reach that final goal, that $1 million over the next 5 years. But again, if we can only capture 20% of what's open, then we'll be able to reach that goal. And when we talk about the budget, when we talk about the financing of the operation that allows us to do what we do, what we do is we divide our revenue into 2 components. The money that we get from the state is money that we spend on all of that activity, all of the marketing. That's all the money that we get from the Department of Commerce. But everything else comes from people in this room. It comes from our counties. It comes from our private sector partnerships. And it also comes from some other grants that might be available as well. But that's the money that we spend to keep the lights on, to keep the doors open. But we cannot use any public sector money for the operations. And that was the main motivator for us to do the capital campaign, was our operational budget needed that security and that consistency. And what I did here was, as a result of our campaign, you can see how the operational fund balance was in decline for a little bit, but then we were able to turn it around, and now we're at a period where we haven't had this type of balance for operations ever, and we're looking forward to kind of continuing our collaboration, again, with everybody in this room to make sure that our fiscal well-being stays strong. I do want to talk about, regional announcements. Everyone's here because they like hearing about the projects that are in the region that are being announced. The 2024-25 fiscal year was productive. We had announcements in every county within the 5-county region. We had a good variety of projects. If you just look at the, the table at the top, really what I noticed first when I was looking over this information is the number of building material products. So we're talking about asphalt, bricks, copper wire, concrete products, road construction equipment. I mean, these are all sectors that are involved with, infrastructure, that are involved with economic growth, that are involved with building. So seeing them make investments in our region confirms that, we are poised, we are in a good position for these companies to, for them to thrive, but then also as a sign that our region is doing well enough to be able to draw that demand here. So we announced 10 projects. There's a total of 713 jobs pledged with those announcements. We did have 6 leads, or 6 of them with manufacturing. 2 of them were foreign direct investment. We had one from Turkey and one from France, and those delivered about 210 jobs. But really another interesting point to note is that 20% of new jobs are coming from local expansions. So again, these are companies that are already here, that are already doing well, that are already connected into the resources that are available to them, and then also working with the counties who might have their existing industry programs that are trying to make sure they're staying ahead of what their community needs are for their economic growth. And really, what we like to see is a good variety of industry being represented here, but then again, having that mix of attraction and expansion projects says a lot about how dynamic the I-77 corridor really is. Moving forward, what does kind of our near future look like? Really what we want to do is, shift away from having the mission of not shift away from the mission, but within our mission, we want to make sure that we're putting more focus on engagement. So we want to have more engagement with our investors, more engagement with our partners, more engagement with our stakeholders. We really want to be seen as providing value to them in order for them to continue their partnership and collaboration and growth. And really what we're doing is we formed an investor relations committee, which we haven't had before. We're going to have enhanced communications. We're going to have more events. Some of you have been receiving our emails for some of these events that we've been having. We went to 2 baseball games down at Segra Park down in Columbia. And coming up, we have a very exciting opportunity where we're coordinating with one of our board of directors, the Southern Entertainment, and they are hosting the Field and Stream Country Music Festival at the beginning of October. And this is a huge country music festival event. And what we're looking to do, the Alliance is looking to do, is we've reached out to our network of site selectors across the country to see if we can entice them to come into town for 3 days. All expenses are paid, and then we tour them around the region. And then while they're here, we also have a sponsorship and give them VIP access to the festival as well. And what we're trying to do here is show site selectors, show the people that are talking to the companies about expanding, what the region has to offer, and give them the information that they need so that when they are talking to companies and they realize that there is an alignment with our region, that they're more likely to reach back to us. And so really that investment in events, local events, is something that we haven't done before, but one that we're now realizing we need to do again in order to stay visible within the local community. We want to continue to keep adding value to our counties and to their projects. We want to make sure that our business development efforts are in line with the strategies of the state. And we're looking forward to cooperating with the Department of Commerce on both their missions domestically and internationally, along with their initiatives and strategies as well. And I mean, ending on the future of the Alliance is kind of where I want to leave it, because all of this information is helpful, but it's better to have it within the context of how does the economy look as a whole. And so what we decided to do was have our keynote speaker be someone that can really get into some of these details and address some of these factors that are affecting our business and affecting what we do on a day-to-day basis, but can oftentimes just be more in the background of our efforts. So our keynote speaker today, Dr. Laura Ulrich, is the Director of Economic Research with Indeed. As Director of Economic Research in North America, Dr. Ulrich brings extensive expertise to her role, with her focus on higher education, community college policy, labor participation, and the economic impact of local development. Prior to joining Indeed, Dr. Ulrich was a senior regional economist and senior manager at the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, where she focused on research relating to higher education and workforce dynamics. She also spent more than a decade as an economics professor and associate dean for undergraduate programs at Winthrop University. She holds a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Georgia and a master's and doctorate in economics from the University of Tennessee. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Laura Ulrich.
Thank you so much. Really happy to be here and to see so many familiar faces. I feel very lucky. When I came to Rock Hill, South Carolina 18 years ago, this month, actually 18 years ago this month, never did I imagine I would really have these kind of 3 separate jobs and be able to do all of this from Rock Hill, South Carolina. I'm really proud of that, and I'm especially proud of my new role. Indeed, the job that I have now has previously been held by people that lived in New York and LA and very big metropolitan areas, and I'm really proud to be doing it from Faro Drive in Rock Hill, South Carolina now. So now that I don't work at the Fed anymore, I don't have to give a disclaimer, so I can jump right in. All right, so I'm gonna go through this really quickly. There's so much to talk about, but I'm gonna try to do it in about 20 to 25 minutes. But I'm gonna talk about what's going on in the labor market and really some slowdowns that we're seeing in the labor market, but also what I would call a pretty significant sector imbalance that's happening currently in the labor market. I'll talk briefly about AI. This is probably the topic that we get asked about the most right now, and so I want to give you some insight into that, and then give you a little bit of insight into a broader economic outlook. And I'll try to save a little bit of time for questions. You might have to stay around a few minutes late for that. All right, so what's going on in the labor market? So this shows a 3-month average, a rolling average, 3-month rolling average of the number of jobs added to the U.S. economy. And I want to point out to you that we need to add about 80 to 100,000 jobs a month, so about right where this laser is, to keep up with population growth, like to keep unemployment rates steady. So if I see a jobs report that's over 80,000, I think of that as like a decent jobs report. It does not have to be negative to be a weak jobs report. If I see something under 80,000, I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of a bit of a contraction. You'll see that in this post-pandemic period, we had extraordinarily strong job growth. We actually had extraordinarily strong economic growth in every way you could cut it, between right after when COVID hit, right when the kind of recovery began, up until 2024. And so during that time, really around 2023, we started dropping below kind of this 250,000 jobs a month, which that's like a booming jobs market. So we had a transition there. And you'll see that here in 2025, we are in the midst of another transition to where we are seeing much weaker jobs reports. And so over the past 3 months, specifically, we've seen levels that would not keep up with population growth. So what does that mean? That means that we're likely to see some increases in unemployment rates if that continues. There are some economists, economists always have different opinions, but there are some economists I've heard say, well, this is just getting us back to an equilibrium. We had this booming time period, and now we're settling out where supply equals demand. I do not see that. That is not my viewpoint on it, and really it is because of this chart here. I have a piece that's going to come out. It was supposed to come out today, but it's going to come out next Tuesday. I'll post it on my LinkedIn to make sure you can connect with me and you can see it, where I talk about the imbalance that is occurring across sectors. What we're really seeing in the U.S. economy right now is that certain sectors, which by the way have traditionally powered a lot of job growth, namely professional and business services, which many of us in this room work in that sector. This is a lot of white-collar jobs, and manufacturing have been losing jobs. And this isn't just over the past, this is the July report. It's not just over the past month, it's actually over the past 2 years. These sectors have been stagnant to declining, where what we're seeing is almost all the growth is occurring in private education and health services. And more specifically, almost all of that growth is occurring in healthcare. Now, this is not a surprise. 15 years ago, when I was teaching economics classes over at Winthrop University, I was telling students that the projections for jobs for the future, like the fastest growing jobs, were almost all in healthcare, because we knew that baby boomers were gonna age. We're gonna have a giant, massive population of retirees. They're gonna require more care, and we are now living in that reality. So that part is not a surprise. But the problem is it's creating a lot of imbalance. You have to have certain skills to work in healthcare. Healthcare is not a sector where typically you can just like show up at the hospital and say, hey, I'd like to work here. You know, we all want our healthcare professionals to be skilled, so they do require certain credentials, many of which can be obtained at Midlands Tech or York Tech, right? Don't require a 4-year degree necessarily, but do require some level of skill. And the piece that I have going live next week talks about the fact that the healthcare sector is almost 80% female. So what we're also seeing is that over the last 2 years, 66% of all jobs in the United States that have been created have been female-held jobs because of this imbalance. So this isn't an imbalance that we can rest on forever. It's like a one-legged stool, right? We can kind of prop there for a short period of time, but we need much better balance as we move forward. It also doesn't mean everybody should rush out to be a healthcare worker. Not all of us are meant to be. I'm somebody who is not meant to be a healthcare worker. Not everybody is meant to do this. Not everybody wants to do it. However, you know, sometimes I get asked in my new role, especially, what advice do you have for young people? It's not a bad sector to look at. You know, if I was advising somebody to go show up at York Tech's door today and to look at programs, healthcare, because of the aging population, is likely to remain a fast-growing sector. What are we seeing at Indeed? Our new data actually just came out. This was from a couple weeks ago. These are job postings. We indexed them to 100 right before COVID hit. And as of a few weeks ago, jobs were 5.2%, job postings were 5.2% above where they were before COVID. That is now a little over 6%. So jobs are still, postings are still elevated compared to COVID. But it very much depends on what field you're looking at. So postings are down in many of these professional and business service jobs. I mentioned that a second ago. You can see here, this is software development, banking and finance, human resources, marketing. I'm going to talk about software development in a minute again when I talk about AI, but it's down about 40% compared to pre-COVID. So there are some sectors that are down really significantly. But even things like banking and finance, human resources are down below pre-COVID levels. Postings are holding up a lot better in what we would call like maybe in-person sectors, so sectors that do require care, hands-on activity. So you can see there, dental, nursing, production, and manufacturing are still above their pre-COVID norms. I wanted to show you the 2 MSAs. This is really interesting. So this is, all 5 counties are either a part of the Charlotte MSA or the Columbia MSA. These are job postings specifically in this region. The pink line is Columbia, the blue line is Charlotte. And again, this is indexed, right? So this shows you the percent growth over time. So what this shows is that the index for Columbia is 138.7. That means that for the Columbia MSA, job postings right now are 38.7% above where they were pre-COVID. That's a tremendous increase, right? Especially in an MSA that had seen lagging job growth for a long time. Columbia had been one of the slower growing MSAs in terms of employment growth in the state. That has really changed. Charlotte is 11% higher now. So this is not an outlier. This actually is pretty, if you look across, at the Fed, my job was, I was the economist for North and South Carolina, so I've spent a ton of time in both states learning those economies. And if you look at both those states, a lot of the mid-sized metro areas, so Charleston, Greenville, Columbia, in North Carolina, Wilmington, Asheville, Greensboro, are seeing much stronger growth. These areas have seen a lot of economic development announcements over the past 5 to 6 years, and they're seeing quite a bit of employment growth So this is very good news. I would say, it's important to look at the national macro picture because that impacts everybody. It also impacts all companies here, right, if you're doing business outside of the state. But I still remain, I used to say all the time when I was at the Fed, like, regardless of what's going on nationally, the Carolinas is where I would want to be right now. Like, this part of the country is going to continue to grow, and I feel like that, a lot of the jobs data continues to show that as well. One thing that's interesting, though, is people are holding tight. I just got quoted in an article on CNBC the other day, and the term they used was job hugging. People are hugging their jobs. They're not letting go, which I thought, and the graphic they used were these two people hugging. It's really cute. You should look it up. I said it was the happiest picture they will ever use for an economics article, I think. But people are holding on to their jobs. The quits rate is low. The quits rate is at 2%. 2.3% was the 2019 average, and we saw a quits rate that was much higher, kind of this immediate post-pandemic period. Why is this? Because of economic uncertainty. People feel less certain about the economy, less certain about the job market. They're more likely to stay where they are. They're more likely to hug onto that job, and that's very much what we are seeing. We are also seeing, though, that layoffs are not popping up as being high. So there have been layoffs. Indeed, the company I work for even had a layoff recently. So there are layoffs going on, but they are not elevated to levels that would be concerning from an economic point of view. Not yet, anyway. We obviously pay very close attention to this. And hires rates are also low. And so now if you look, we're in this environment where we're in this low hire, low fire environment. So companies are hiring less. They're not laying people off. People aren't quitting. So there's not new space being created for new entrants to the labor market. So there's been a lot written recently about the difficulties of new grads and younger people in finding jobs. That is a real phenomenon. The unemployment rate for people who've just graduated from college is higher than it normally is compared to those who are further along in their career. That is a real phenomenon, but I don't personally attribute that to AI or some other factor more than I do this. This is it's a stagnant market. People are staying where they are, and if people are maybe not retiring as soon as they expected, they're not quitting, they're not getting fired, there's not new room created at the bottom of the enterprise. So we need more churn in the labor market to have a healthy job market. So now we have a scenario where the ratio of openings to unemployed people is at below where we were in 2019. Which looks a lot different than it did. We kind of got used to how it was in that 2021 to 2024 period, and things have just changed. The prime age labor force participation rate is starting to dip a little bit. The expectations, the BLS believes that it will be down here by 2032. That is mostly driven by the aging population. But we do have an interesting thing going on where prime age labor force participation, so this is age 25 to 54, has grown much more recently. And you can see compared to COVID, right, like females had a much bigger impact from COVID itself. To all the ladies in the room who had children doing school at home like I did for a year and a half, we know why people left the labor market. It was really hard, right? So people did leave, a lot of working mothers left. But women have recovered very well. But this also matches that story I was telling about healthcare growing so much, that being so female dominated. Also, there have been pretty strong growth in fields like education and state and local government, which are also female dominated. And so we've seen stronger labor force participation rates amongst women. There has been a decline this year. And there was an interesting Washington Post article last week that did show that young mothers with children under age 5 have left the labor force in big numbers this year, and that is attributed to a lot of companies changing their flexible work positions, like calling workers back 5 days a week. Women have a higher elasticity of labor, which means if you make changes like that, women are more likely to leave the labor force. They're more likely to make a change. Wage growth has really come down. It's now on our measure at Indeed 2.9%. Our measure looks at posted wages, so it's not as good of data, if I'm being honest, than the Bureau of Labor Statistics data, which is at 3.9%. But both metrics are slightly above inflation, which means that there is some real wage growth going on, but growth has really slowed down compared to what we saw a few years ago. All right, what about AI? What role is AI playing here? It is already playing a role, and it's going to play a bigger role. How many of you in this room regularly use AI? Okay, I love to ask this question because in theory, everybody should raise their hand, because if you use your cell phone, you are using AI. Google is using it in the background. If you're using, I'll just tell you that most of these jobs that have seen really significant declines have the word developer in the title. Or analyst. These are coders. These are entry-level coders. Those jobs are pretty easily replaced by AI. I don't know if anybody other than me uses ChatGPT for coding purposes, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. But there are other jobs, so Oracle manager, SAP lead, engineer, data center technician, which is a job that you could get certified for at a technical college. Software engineer, technology lead. There are some jobs that have really grown. The issue, though, is that these are more senior level jobs, and these jobs take a higher level of education. So one of the questions is, if the jobs at the bottom, those entry level jobs, go away, how do you train people for these jobs at the top? And that is something that we will have to deal with. So I don't want the narrative about AI jobs to scare people off from going into technology, because the reality is there are parts of technology that we're going to need even more people for to manage AI. But right now, we don't really see AI making a tremendous difference outside of some of these narrow bands of jobs. However, that's going to change. AI is going to develop and be able to do certain jobs. And so I've even started talking to my own children about how do you position yourself. My oldest son is getting master's in data science. That's a job that could be impacted. How do you position yourself to where you're attached to a sector in doing that job that maybe would be less likely to be impacted by AI, right? There's a lot of good research out there about which sectors are likely to be impacted or not. Overall, the existence of AI might increase the number of jobs that are available in the total economy, but it's going to change the structure of which jobs those are and the education and training you need to do those jobs. All right, really quickly, the economic outlook. So labor market has slowed in a lot of sectors. I expect that to continue in the short run. I'm going to be surprised if we see a lot more jobs added in the near term outside of some of these limited sectors. But the economy is still churning along. We're not seeing layoffs. We're not seeing, really high unemployment insurance claims and some of the things we would pay attention to as signs that we were going into recession, for example. But it's going to be interesting because we've seen, I came from the Fed, so I know a lot about the Federal Reserve, and they've got to balance the unemployment risk with that of inflation, which is also core inflation is ticking up a bit, and with tariffs it could tick up more. So this balance is going to be really interesting to observe over the next few months. There are upside and downside risk when it comes to policy changes that are going to really impact the economy. The upside risk, and Senator Graham talked about this briefly, upside risk is that there have been, the One Big Beautiful Bill did extend the tax cuts that were temporary. They would have expired at the end of this year. So that has happened. There's been some deregulation. This generally means faster economic growth, more jobs. The downside risk, though, is tariffs and tariff uncertainty and immigration restrictions. These are creating significant headwinds, especially for some industries. Tariffs in general, economists would believe that if you have tariffs, those are a tax on the importation of goods, and the cost of that tax would be passed on to consumers. That's what economic theory would tell us. That's what your Econ 101 textbook told you if you took that class. However, we've never tried tariffs at the scale we're doing it right now, so we could see something different happen. Right now I feel like the uncertainty is too great for me to like make a prediction over which one of these is a bigger impact. Immigration restrictions also in terms of labor. Immigrants do make up a decent percentage of the total labor in the United States, and so this could be a negative shock to labor supply, which could cause even tighter labor markets. And this is especially true in some industries like construction, agriculture, and leisure and hospitality. So in terms of recruiting in today's labor market, just thought I would leave you with a few things from Indeed. Pay is going to remain important. I talked about how wage growth had really normalized, but still we're in a tight labor market. You saw what labor force participation rates are doing. We're still in a tight labor supply environment, and so pay levels are going to remain important. It's also important to maintain a deep talent pool. This means looking at how you're hiring, who is eligible to hire, jobs that you have that say they need a bachelor's degree. Do they really? Could you look at people that have a criminal background? Could you expand your talent pools in ways that you haven't thought of? And then also in this world where people are hugging on to their jobs, which is a good thing for many employers that have good teams, how do you keep them, right? When we move out of job hugging, how do you keep the teams that you've built? That's through retention strategy. And then the last thing I'll say is, this year, if you look, there's a thing called the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index that measures the level of uncertainty in the economy. This year, it's the highest it's ever been in the history of that data series. It's hard for people and businesses to make decisions in an uncertain environment. My former boss talked about, he always used the analogy of driving through fog. And he would say there's some fog where almost everybody slows down in the fog, right? That's what they teach you in driver's ed, is if there's fog to slow down, but the fog can get so thick that you have to pull over. And so some companies have pulled over. They've stopped hiring for now. They've stopped, they've decided not to do expansion or whatever, carry on expansion plans. Others are just being more cautious and moving slower. And so you have to plan for that uncertainty as much as you can, right? Which is difficult to do, but we just are in an uncertain environment right now, which for economists is tough, right? Because it's difficult to measure uncertainty. It's really difficult. So I'll stop. You can see all our work at hiringlab.org. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you're not already, I post all my stuff there, but I'm happy to take a few questions if there are some. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so he's asking about like the different generations and kind of the chop between those. There's so much interesting stuff there. And I study a lot of this in my work. One of the interesting things that is difficult to model right now is baby boomers have been one of the hardest working generation, probably the hardest working generation in history, and they're working longer. And harder. And so if you look at those younger generations, they're working about 15% fewer hours. Males especially are working about 15% fewer hours, which at a micro level is not a big deal, but a macro level is a really big deal, right, as baby boomers retire. There's some interesting work that's being done that's saying us Gen Xers, who were known as the grumpy generation that just nobody even talks about, we're just like grumpy, that we're going to retire earlier, that we're going to be one of the earlier retiring generations. I think because we just don't care. That's what people think. So there are some estimates that show instead of there being 20 years between the retirement of the generations, it will be 6-ish. If that happens, that's going to be a tremendous shift in the labor market, because then you've got to get these millennials and Gen Zs up, ready to lead companies and be managers, and right? It's a tremendous loss of institutional knowledge. And so it presents real challenges within companies, and also the Gen Z generation especially is very different than the baby boomers. I remind people in my talks a lot that History shows that a generation has never changed their behavior because an older generation wanted them to. So we can give up on that. It's never happened. But they want to work different. They also want to work hard, but they want to work different. And so this is presenting a lot of, I hear about it a lot from companies when we talk to companies. It's creating a lot of issues within firms to try to figure out how you transition through these generations. It's something I'm exceedingly interested in. It's just very, very interesting. Mm-hmm. Hey, Harry. Good.
Picking up on that, could you comment a little more on the gap between men, especially men in urban areas, and even in rural South Carolina, younger men who just are not getting onto the labor market?
Yeah. This is one of the key areas of my research. Is something I've been interested in since my time at Winthrop, because I have 3 boys. Many of you know this. I have 3 boys, and I'm really eager to help them get out of my house. I love them so much. I'm obsessed with my kids, but I just launched a second one this past weekend, so 2 for 3 so far. But anyway, males have had a harder time in the labor market, and actually, in this piece I just wrote about healthcare, I talk about this. 95% of all speech language pathologists in the United States are female. 95%. There's no inherent reason for that, right? This is about cultural norms, but you make about $100,000 a year as a speech language pathologist on average. We did a really good job encouraging females to move into STEM fields. I'm one of them. It worked on me. I was a kid. They told me I was really good at math. You should focus on that, and I did it. And I moved into a male-dominated field. I think we have to start doing an equally good job encouraging men to go into helping jobs. That's where the growth is happening. I think it's where the growth is going to continue. And so if you have jobs, nursing pays a great wage, right? It's 80-something, I think 86% female. So we've got to figure that out, because the reality is, if you look at those jobs where I showed some of the sectors that are shrinking, those are male dominated. Yeah, so I think this is an effort. And by the way, I don't think that we need to stop encouraging women to go into STEM fields to be able to do the same thing on the opposite side, right? So it's not like prioritizing one, it's both. It's both. So I think this is really important, really, really important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, good to see you. Thank you.
The AI slide, I appreciate that. My kids, the way I talk to them, they're so defeated, they're scared to death of the future that there's going to be no jobs.
Yeah, I know.
AI is going to take over everything, so we're trying to show them that stuff. But speaking a little bit about the labor stuff, where are we now, or what's Indeed seeing this whole coming back to the office? You talked about mentoring people and can't do that from the remote and that stuff, but do you got any thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, there's about 7% of jobs that are remote nationally. Most jobs require some in-office presence. I think that companies that have gone back to 5 days a week required, some of them have really struggled to maintain their labor force. The reality is, I changed jobs because they asked me to come back 5 days a week in person. I turned it, I'll be very, very, it wasn't the reason, but it was a reason. And why? I'm a working mom. I have 3 kids. My labor elasticity is very high, right? I can make a change. And so what ends up happening when you have too restrictive of an environment is sometimes the people that have the most ability to move are the movers, right? So that being said, I think it is important to have an in-person environment at some level. I don't have that now, and I'm missing it. So I do think that is important. But I do also think it's important for employers to think about why people might prefer a hybrid environment versus 5 days a week, and that for some workers, that ability to be a little flexible is really important for them to be able to remain productive in the labor force. And especially as we rely more and more on female labor, it's just the reality, right? If you're a working mom and you've got kids all over the place and you've got soccer practice and you've got this, it's very hard, right? It's hard. And so I think it's something that I understand why companies have such a desire to get everybody 5 days a week. I also am painfully personally aware of why that's hard for a lot of people. So I think there's 2 sides.
You
Yeah.
might have just answered part of this, but I was going to ask you
So I never thought I would leave the Fed. I thought I would retire from there, just like I never thought I would leave Winthrop. I thought I would retire from there, and then all of a sudden I had the opportunity at the Fed. I'm like, I got to go. That kind of the same thing happened to me again. I will say, though, that for me, I am very interested in the path from high school, K through 12, to a job, how that happens. For some people, like myself, it's a pretty smooth process. I went from high school to college to job. Never had a period of unemployment. But it doesn't look like that for most people. And I'm interested in the messy parts. And in this Indeed data, I'm going to be able to see the messiness. I'll be able to see the job seekers, but also the job postings, right? So like if a job posting, are job people who are posting jobs actually getting the type of candidates they want? Is it something in the job posting that's preventing that? Are candidates not showing themselves in the best light? I'll be able to get into that data. So a lot of it was about the data that I'll have my hands on because I'm a nerdy economist. Also for me, I mean, as I said, like one of the things at the Fed was they did call us back 5 days a week. And for me, that was really hard because I was driving all the way up 77. I mean, I could draw you a really good map up to Uptown. And so that was really difficult, right? There's great things about living in Rock Hill, South Carolina, but one of them would not be driving to Uptown every day. And so for me, it was a way for me to grow my skills and be able to stay right here and be able to come talk to you guys, right? I don't have to move somewhere else. So it was just I feel really lucky to have been able to go from higher ed to government-ish to private sector. Yeah, whole new adventure though, Randy?
Doctor, do you tell your sons and young people to get out and knock on the door, speak to people, see them, shake their hand, versus, flood the internet with their resume 10 times?
So I will say, people in this room who know me, my middle son just went to college this past weekend, and the saddest thing about him going to college was he had to resign from his job at QT. And he's worked at QT at the truck stop on exit 77 since he turned 16. And he is the most loyal QT employee you've ever met in your life, to the point where he's using his QT backpack as his backpack for college. The rule in our house, because of the research I do, is that you have to have a job at 15. My youngest 15-year-old works at PW's right now. But at 16, you're going to have a job where you wear a uniform. And I don't know a person that works there. Because if you show up late, I want you to get fired. And I have seen in my research, my opinion is a lot of the issues, especially with male workers, is they are not entering the labor force early enough. And the longer you wait, the harder it is. So I make my boys say all the time, no one else has to do this. I'm sure they don't. I'm sure they don't. But unfortunately, your mother chose this as her research topic. So you better get your Harris Teeter shirt and get on to work. That's how I feel about it. So one day they will be thankful, maybe. Maybe time for one more question? All right, thank you guys so much for the opportunity.
This is our 11th summit, but actually it's really only our 10th one in person because of the pandemic. But I think this is the most on time we've ever been. So I'm going to go ahead, wrap it up, and let everybody get back on the road. Thank you for coming out today. We encourage you to kind of stay in touch with us, stay in contact with us. Keep paying attention to our social media, our LinkedIn. We're always putting out information, and we're always looking for new partnerships and new collaborations. So we appreciate it, and thanks again.